Welcome to Enigma.
I'm designing a machine to break every German message instantly.
You do not have to do this alone.
I know a lot of spies, Alan. You've got more secrets than the best of them.
Our patience has expired.
Sometimes it is the people no one imagines anything of who do the things that no one can imagine.
I'm Glenn Garland, and this is Editors on Editing. When I first spoke with William Goldenberg, he'd been nominated for the Oscar, the BAFTA, and the Emmy for both Argo and Zero Dark 30. He went on to win all 3 awards for Argo. This year, he has edited both Unbroken, which I have not had the pleasure of seeing, and the exceptional film, The Imitation Game, for which he has been nominated for the Emmy, the BAFTA, and the Oscar. Billy, it's a real pleasure to have you here tonight.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So how did you become involved in this film? I thought it was fantastic.
It's actually a funny story. I was lucky enough to be at the BAFTAs a couple of years ago, and this guy came up to me with long blonde hair, whose English wasn't great, and he said, "I love your work. I have this movie I'm doing. It's a little movie. I'd love you to do it." And I was just like, I didn't know what to make of it, and it was too loud to even have a real conversation. And I said, "Great, let's talk about it. I'd love to," and I didn't even know anything about it. And then I got sent the script, and it turned out that was the guy.
Well, the script is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, Grant did such a great job. Such a difficult thing to take a biographical movie and make it into something that's richer, making it into something that's plays like a thriller and also an emotional story and a human drama and has humor in it. And he was able to incorporate all those elements really seamlessly.
5 minutes and 34 seconds.
You said to do it in under 6.
There was actually a lot more humor than I would expect from a drama like this, because the subject matter is pretty heavy.
It was comedy, but not for this. Hopefully, not for the sake of comedy.
No.
Only organic to the movie, organic to the situations that
Yes.
Alan is in. He's socially awkward and doesn't know how to really get along with people and fit in, and then those are the things that become humorous.
Alan,
Yes?
I said we're going to get some lunch. Alan,
Yes?
can you hear me?
Yes.
I said we're off to get some lunch. This is starting to get a little bit repetitive.
What is?
I had asked if you wanted to come to lunch with us.
No, you didn't. You said you were going to get some lunch.
I think it makes the movie really enjoyable on top of the fact that it's thrilling. I think it's a great added element to the film.
Yeah, it never felt pushed. It felt right on. It felt very organic.
There were other parts that we took out that did feel like a little bit like we're just trying to get a laugh. And they were funny, but we felt when we watched the film that it was just, this is only in there for a laugh, and it's really not part of our story. I'm sure they would have gotten a huge response in the theater, but I think it would have taken the audience out of it.
Sure, that one time where he's telling the bear joke, and you just stay on the one shot while he tells the whole joke, and because you just stay on him, it feels really awkward, but in a good way, because he doesn't know how to tell a joke. So.
It's funny, I mean, Morton did 15 takes of that. 15 takes of that single shot. And finally, the one I used was the last take, and he said, tell the joke as if you're telling somebody an equation, a mathematical equation. And that was his direction, and that was the one. It was so clear to use that one. Because as a joke, it's actually not that bad a joke. I mean, it's kind of funny, and then the other guys gave us great reactions.
Well, it's like a balloon almost gets bigger and bigger, and then it pops. You just stay in that one shot.
Yeah. No, it was great. I mean, the benefit of having someone like Benedict is you're able to hold performance. I mean, he's so exceptional. And there's a scene in the interrogation room where I think we're on Alan for like a full minute and a half.
Is that when he's talking about the imitation game?
Yeah, what the imitation game is, and it's just it's so exciting for me as an editor. It's just not because it's easy, just because it's to have performance like that, to just hang on something like that, because you really
get inside their head.
Yeah, and somebody like Benedict is just he's so enjoyable just to watch, and every time I watch the film, I never got tired of seeing him.
No, he's fascinating.
Would you like to play?
Play?
It's a game. A test of sorts. For determining whether something is a machine or a human being.
Everybody on this film, I think, came to it with this passion to tell the story. I mean, no one, believe me, it was a very low-budget movie, and they shot it in just 2 months, and everybody sacrificed because they just wanted to be a part of it, because they love Graham's script. And not many of us didn't know that much about Alan. We didn't.
Yeah, how much did you know about?
I knew who he was, but I didn't really, and I knew he broke the enigma code, sort of, you know what I mean? But then, you start reading about it, and it's one of those, no, you can't believe it. It's like, that's the great movies, where it's a huge story, but there's this little micro story that no one's ever heard about. We were all about telling a story that celebrates differences, people that are different and think differently and act differently, and that's a good thing. Conforming is not the way to do it.
Well, I love that scene when he takes Joan Clark under his wing.
Miss, did you really solve this puzzle yourself?
What makes you think I couldn't solve the puzzle myself?
And he sees that she's different, I'm different, and he
she's
invites her in.
She's a kindred spirit, and admires her sort of her gutsiness, and puts that really impresses him.
I'm a woman in a man's job, and I don't have the luxury of being an ass.
Because he can be a bastard sometimes, Alan can be sort of not a nice guy. Was that a difficult line to walk as far as keeping him, likable?
We were very careful, especially, the first time we meet him when he really sits down and talks, it's Commander Denniston.
I like solving problems, Commander. And Enigma is the most difficult problem in the world.
No, Enigma isn't difficult, it's impossible. The Americans, the Russians, the French, the Germans, everyone thinks Enigma is unbreakable.
Good. Let me try, and we'll know for sure, won't we?
And that scene in particular, Morton and I had lots of conversations while I was cutting it. And what's Alan like? Is he intentionally arrogant? Is he intentionally off-putting? Is he aware? How self-aware is he? How self-aware do we make him? And talked about the real Turing and how he was, what we came up with, and what I think was the truth of it is that he's just honest. And Alan just doesn't know anything but honest. And he just tells it like it is, and let the chips fall where they may, and that sort of obviously alienates people. Benedict did such a good job and gave us so many different colors to work with in the editing room. We were able to shade it up and down and how we wanted it. So we were able to modulate his performance.
So he didn't tip too far in one direction.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we had all the tools. Every performance was great, but how big do we let him get?
The narration was really interesting. I don't know how much of it was on the page of the script and how much of it changed, but it's almost like he's talking to the audience. He's sort of caressing them and bringing them into the story. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, again, it's sort of the puzzle element of it. It seems as if he's talking to the audience and talking down to them, and then obviously comes back into the center of the film, and you realize it's the interrogation. It was scripted that way. We added the piece in the front where Knock walks in, drops the file on the table, and then you hear him say in black, "Are you paying attention?"
Yeah.
Well, it used to just start in black, "Are you paying attention?" But we wanted to root him in that room. Then it repeats later in the film.
What did you do during the war?
I worked in a radio factory.
What did you really do during the war?
Are you paying attention?
When you have the page, it's one thing, but when you have the images, it's another thing. So
you get it much
quicker.
quicker.
Get things, and you didn't need as much, so we thinned it out quite a bit. And then there were other places in the film where we added some bits of narration, just sort of amp up the stakes of the war in order to sort of take what we already had and just enhance it.
And sometimes it puts it in context when he talks about if you were trying to decipher this, it would take 20 million years to decipher, what you had 20 minutes to decipher.
If there was ever a great way to set the stakes in a movie, it's just like, oh, well, that's going to be hard.
Yeah.
That's the mountain they have to climb, and it's incredible.
Tell me about the choice to use stock footage. There seemed to be a lot of stock footage. Was it to sort of make everything seem more real?
Well, in the original screenplay, when at the end, in that section, there was stock footage in the screenplay. The Winston Churchill, Harry Truman, people in Times Square. And so we had the film, and that was working really beautifully. And we found that reinforced the idea that this is a real war and people are dying, and this is, the stakes are high, and this is a race against time.
Sure.
So it just kept bringing the war back into the film.
Now, some of the stuff was shot, right?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff of the ships, the German spy planes, seeing the convoy of British ships in the beginning. And
well, there's that great transition where the torpedo then becomes the
cigarette.
The cigarette.
Yeah.
I just love that.
I know, and it's funny because they shot it. That's actually a flop because they shot it and they had the screen direction of the cigarette going the wrong way. So it's like I had to make it go left to right, not right to left. So, but yeah, that was Morton came up with that. But there's so much archival footage in World War II. It was more like the machinery of war. It wasn't, and we wanted the personal story of the war to be our people, our people at Bletchley. We didn't want to just introduce, mountains of bodies and all kinds of, because there's so much horror that we could have shown, but we wanted it to be the machinery of war, just the.
Well, I love that scene where you have Hitler and then just the spinning disc and the superimpositions. It just felt like machine against machine.
Well, it starts off with the wheel turning, and then it turns into a tank wheel turning, and then the superimposition of the wheels of the machine of Christopher is turning, and that's a bad thing, because we want the machine to stop. Because when the machine stops, then they
they solve it.
And when this machine doesn't stop, neither do the Nazis.
Yeah, I mean they're against time.
Yeah.
They're trying to decipher the code, and then tick tock, tick tick. And then you cut off the tick-tock before he can finish, which really gets you.
In a strange way, the movie's a lot about people failing, because they constantly, the bell rings at 12 o'clock and that's it. The frustration of having another day go by and not being able to solve it. And then Graham wrote some additional narration there, and then we came up with the idea in the cutting room of like tick-tock, tick, and then the bell cutting it off so that, it was really make it really loud.
Yeah, because you expect him to finish talk.
And then, the bell is abnormally loud to kind of shock the audience, a little bit, so.
There's one time that you did this sort of interesting thing with sound where you're pushing into Alan and you start hearing the echoing of the machine going click, 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 click.
We cut the film together and we were very aware of the race against time and keeping up the tension and the pressure of the race against time, but we realized we had shortchanged Alan a little bit. So we went back and sort of added human moments of him, and that being one of them. And just letting, because again, Benedict's acting is so powerful, that like letting those human moments and letting really soak in and let the audience soak into his performance. And that was one where what we did was we sort of washed the sound away.
That's what it was.
And just sort of let it be his sort of like, quiet moment, even though there's all this noise around him. And I think it really helped sell the frustration to get inside of him. And that was something we sort of touched on in the editing room, and then our sound guys did a wonderful job actually of enhancing that, and they did such a great job with the machine. I mean, it's so complicated. I mean, there was a sound it made during production that wasn't even that bad, but there's so many moving parts in it, and we kept kicking it back, and poor Lee Walpole, our sound designer, like, yeah, not quite there yet, but at the end of the day, he did such a great job of like, you really feel like you feel all the layers inside the machine, and
well, the machine is a person in a way, a character.
Yeah, I mean, it looks very similar to the real one. They made it look a little more cinematic. And then what Morton added and the production designer added were all those red wires. They were the veins and the lifeblood of the machines. It just made, and they really tried to humanize it. So we wanted to make it as real a three-dimensional thing as we could.
Sure. When Alan's running and it intercuts with him trying to design the machine, it was sort of interesting. It's like the human machine and the mechanical machine and the difference between the two.
Well, what I loved about that, and I didn't know they were going to do it, was what he's drawing, and then he puts up a piece of paper, then in the end you cut and you see the whole machine is drawn out on little bits of paper, and I just thought, when I remember seeing the dailies for that and being like, wow, that was really cool, And Alan was like an Olympic level marathon runner. So we wanted to include that as part of the story, so that like this is his escape, that he's using it as part of his thinking process. And it was just trying, and it's kind of a feel thing, because we kept recutting that and recutting it to try and have it build and build and build to to this culmination where he just leans back in a chair, and there it is.
Sure.
I mean, obviously it's sort of an editorial trick in a way, but because you're doing it in like 30 seconds.
But it feels like a lot of time going on because he's running and it's like he's chasing this thing that's...
It's sometimes a difficult thing to do, to compress time like that, but to get this huge idea across at the same time. So I'm glad it worked for you, because it was was a lot of work that went into getting it just right.
The structure of the film is almost like solving an enigma machine. It's non-linear. Was it in the script like that?
It is scripted, pretty close to that. I mean, it always was three timelines that intersected. I mean, it was never linear. We did move some pieces around to get better narrative drive, to have better story connection, to make story arcs a little cleaner. In the original screenplay, the 50s and the 20s were always sort of tied together. Every time we went back to the 50s, it was followed by a scene in the 20s. And that's what that's what the big thing we did in the three time periods. We separated it because it was too long away from our main story. So we separated that so that you either went to the 20s and back to the 40s or the 50s and back to the 40s. So, the one big move we made that we're so proud of in the editing room is, when young Alan finds out that Christopher's dead. That happened a fair amount earlier in the film, in the script, and we moved it later to sort of have it be like this bomb that dropped, that all the motivations and all of the things that make Alan, you find out, are motivated from that one thing, that the loss of Christopher. And
so you're not realizing it's all
it all
leading
sort
up
of,
to
all the pieces come together at that moment, and then we have this great cut. We go to a shot of Alan in the 50s sitting looking at the Christopher machine, the newer version
That's
of it,
right.
With his back to us, and just all the loss, on both sides of the cut, from when he was a little boy to when he's, a 40-year-old man. And we found it such an emotional cut. It's like such a good illustration of the power of film editing, because that juxtaposition tells you so much story. That was one big move, and then the first time we go back to young Alan in the Sherborne School, we moved that later in the film. It was earlier, but we wanted to set up all the stakes at Bletchley.
Well, that's a great transition too, because it's like you must have been very popular in
Yeah.
school,
It
and
seems
then
like-
it goes right to. I mean, is that the way it was written?
No,
or?
it wasn't written that way,
Oh,
and it
it's
seems
great.
like it should have been. Yeah, I know. We were like, well, that seems to make sense. I mean, that, if we want to go to the school,
Yeah.
we were worried that it was too obvious, but it was a really perfect place at that point to learn something about what made him tick.
What if I don't fancy being with Joan in that way?
Because you're a homosexual.
One of the things that you really held back for a long time, but you just hinted at, was the homosexuality whole thing. You didn't make that clear for a very long time.
Well, when Graham talks about the screenplay, I mean, Alan was a puzzle, and Alan loved solving puzzles. That was what he was about, and that's what ended up breaking Enigma. You says you defeated the Nazis with a crossword puzzle. So he wrote the screenplay intentionally, making the screenplay a bit of a puzzle. All the pieces have to come together by the end of it, and that's a section of the movie that we were very careful about and wanted to do it justice, and then obviously led to his demise, which is just such a tragedy, the way he was treated.
I thought that the movie also became sort of an interesting thing where they're hiding their knowledge of the enigma and he's hiding his sexuality. And that became another sort of underlying theme. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it's an interesting thing that happens, because once they break, you would think that in a movie like this, once they break the code, like, well, yeah. So, but then things get really complicated, because the secrets, and that's sort of like another sort of arc of the film, it becomes about keeping secrets and, who knows what and how much you can tell, and it's not black and white.
I think that sometimes it is the people who no one imagines anything of, who do the things that no one can imagine.
So the last thing he shot was that scene where Kira tells him what he meant to the world, and he's just a broken man. And Benedict was so emotional about having played Alan and having gone through everything that when he was doing the scene, he just couldn't stop crying.
Sure.
And he was, I think in the middle of doing it, is what I only say this because I've heard him say it, is that he realized he was crying for Alan and not as Alan. So we had to, at the end of the day, scale back a little bit in the editing to make him cry.
So
hold the moment, so it wasn't just
it wasn't the actor. It was
yes, it was coming from inside the
character.
character, exactly. Yeah. It's just so amazing to me. I mean, it's not really answering your question, but it's so amazing to me that it was illegal and continued to be illegal for years after that. I mean, it's just...
You think that was really a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago.
It's such recent history, and it's really hard to believe in a way, and it's really thrilling to be able to tell Alan's story and get it out there and have people understand what this guy was and how great he was and all the things he could have done. And that's the tragedy of
Yeah,
all
I
of it,
mean,
you
you
know.
wonder, like, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
what would he have achieved?
There's like 5 more movies in there, you know. It's about, he was working on artificial intelligence, and I mean, just the you know, the number line that he wrote for the computer is the number line that is used now. I mean, just, and it was, you know, he did it in the 40s. And a lot of his theories were dismissed because he was gay, and you know, it was publicly humiliated in a way that he was so shamed, and then in combination with the drugs he was being given, just, you know, destroyed him. And he started, when you see it in the film, it's just,
When his hand can't
he can't focus.
do
he
the
can't
crossword
do a
puzzle,
puzzling, yeah.
and it's like
It's devastating.
puzzles were all his whole life, and now.
Sort of all been ripped from him, you know.
Well, I thought it was a brilliant, really entertaining film. I really loved it.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm really proud of it.
Sometimes it is the people who no one imagines anything of who do the things that no